all else, they were just so disciplined, you know. And
In what
Trump
respect?
on message, you know, they were just ruthless. You know, they'd just take the head off someone who wasn't on message and pulling in the same direction. And that's politics, you know. And Trump, I think, is sort of beginning to. Part of his appeal is the amateur thing. I'm not really a politician, but I think that the wheels come off that when it comes to the crunch.
Do you see that discipline in the national government?
Actually,
Stephen Joyce and Paula Bennett wouldn't have jobs if that applied here.
no, I think they're a bit of an exception that proves a rule. I think that discipline has been there in the past, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. I'm desperately keen to get Finley's thoughts on this next story. Actress Jennifer Aniston has written a piece for the Huffington Post about the gossip which surrounds her life, returning to an issue Michael brought up and panel says Jennifer Aniston would have to be one of the most paparazzi people in the world. And this is the first time she's addressed gossip. And I would send you there, actually, to read it, because it makes quite interesting reading. So, Finley, you've had a read through her essay, and you've been an editor for years, read all sorts of good and bad writing. How does she do out of 10?
Oh, I would certainly have published this. I hope she did write it. You know,
Yeah,
and I think she did.
that sounds
I actually
out.
like Jennifer Aniston a lot. I think she's a really good actress. I think, you know, old what's-his-name was a mug for leaving her.
Brad Pitt.
Brad, yeah.
Your team, Jen.
Yeah, totally.
I can get you the T-shirt if you like.
Yeah, and some of her movies have been, I really loved Office Space. It's a great little movie. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm a sucker for Marley and Me as well, you know. But anyway, beside the point, it's really nicely written. And the thing that interests me about it is that she's walking a very fine line, because she's someone who's made one of the classic Faustian pacts, you know. To succeed in show business, she has to look a certain way, she has to be a certain way, and she has to make a deal with the devil when it comes to publicity. And here she is turning around and saying, actually, it goes too far, it's absurd, it's obscene at times, it sends terrible messages to women and so on. She actually pulls the argument off pretty well. You know, there's a kind of self-deprecating humility between the lines of it. I don't think she actually comes to the same point I do when these arguments are made, and that is, we're never going to get rid of the paparazzi. It's going to be about the appetite for it declining. Whether she's hoping too much from the great unwashed, I don't know. Like you were saying earlier, you know, there is something awful but appealing about these stories.
Why is people getting fired so appealing? That's what the Herald led with on the breakfast thing on Saturday.
I thought the same thing. I was almost going to take to social media, but then I never took to social media.
Who is toast, I think, was the headline.
Yeah, I thought, why is it okay just because these people are in the public eye to say something like that? You wouldn't say that about someone who worked in a car factory or something, would you? I mean, it'd be just cruel.
No, it's sort of sport, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that is like part of the Faustian pact. Yeah. And I don't think you can have your cake and eat it, but she has a good go at it.
Michael, what did you make of the column?
Yeah, I agree with Finley. In fact, I would go more. I think she's done a stunning job, if it was indeed her who wrote this. Some sentences are memorably good. We use celebrity news to perpetuate this dehumanising view of females focused solely on one's physical appearance, which tabloids turn into a sporting event of speculation. Is she pregnant, etc.? I think she's done a really powerful amount of thought and done a great writing job if she is the author of it.
Finley, can I ask you, in your editing career, have you ever employed a celebrity name who wasn't a very good writer, but you employed them to write a column because you knew it would bring eyeballs?
No, I haven't. I always employed them because they were a good writer. Yeah.
Do you see columnists now in magazines and newspapers and think, you're a terrible writer, but I can see why they've hired you?
Yeah, I do see that, and particularly with the cross-platform co-promotion that goes on with media companies now.
And what are their names, the ones that you particularly
Well, there's a restaurant reviewer that's on the radio. I'm trying to remember
just about
his name.
5 o'clock. Thanks so much, Finley McDonald. Good to have you in.
Thank you.
Michael Deacon, nice to talk to you as well.
Always good, thank you.
Yeah, good to chat. It's just about 5 o'clock. Going to slap the man next to me. John Campbell and Checkpoint is on the way.
Kia ora everyone, ko John Campbell aho. Haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tau te maira I hoama, he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, another police shooting. We're live at the scene and we take a police media conference live. The government calls in the lawyers over a charity that's holding on to millions of dollars in public funds. In search of affordable housing, we talk to the people who can't find it and the people who are building it. Britain has a new Prime Minister. We go live to London. The CEO of Horton Media tells us why they oppose the merger of NZME and Fairfax. A Pokemon in Charleston and grey power lights up over lighting up. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good afternoon. Eyewitnesses have described seeing a man armed with a slasher shot twice by police at a busy intersection in Rotorua this afternoon. It's the second shooting by police in 2 days. Nick Marshall was fatally shot during a drugs and weapons raid on a Hamilton property on Tuesday night. People in nearby shops have said officers chased a man waving a metal rod or slasher tool through the intersection of Tarawera Road and Tangai Road before being shot twice. St John Ambulance said a man was taken to Rotorua Hospital in a serious condition. Officers remain at a property on Tangai Road and motorists are being told to avoid the area. More details are expected to come out of a media conference at the Rotorua Police Station in half an hour. 8 children and 2 adults have escaped from a South Auckland house fire unharmed. The blaze engulfed a state house and threatened to spread to neighbouring properties on Archboyd Avenue in Mangere this afternoon. Smoke alarms alerted the occupants to the blaze and fire crews stopped the fire from spreading. Specialist fire investigator Philip Fadley says the fire has gone from end to end of the house, damaging most of its contents and its structure.
The family's devastated. Housing New Zealand will be providing them with some temporary accommodation for a while because the house is not habitable. So they're feeling quite a bit shocked and necessarily having to try and get on with their life.
Philip Fadley says it would have been very different if there hadn't been smoke alarms installed. The head of the local Grey Power chapter pushing for the legalisation of medicinal cannabis is standing by her group despite opposition from the national organisation. The Otamatea chapter of Grey Power unanimously voted in May to start a petition supporting legalisation. Grey Power's president Tom O'Connor says the National Federation isn't behind the cause and blames activists for promoting their own cause. The Otamatea president Beverly Aldridge says they came to the decision on their own.
There are a lot of us who are maintaining our health now with health supplements, and we want to include this in our arsenal so that when we actually die, we don't want to die a long, protracted death. We want to just go, but in the meantime, we want to have an optimum of health until we actually do die.
Beverly Aldridge of Otamatea Grey Power. More buyers have told RNZ they're struggling to contact developers about promised affordable housing in Auckland's special housing areas. The areas were created to increase the housing supply of the city, and most developments are required to include a percentage of affordable homes. One Auckland woman told Checkpoint she phoned Auckland Council, but a staff member told her that it was not up to them to provide the developers' details and she'd have to find them herself. She says she tried hard via the web and companies' offices, made phone calls and went to the Citizens Advice Bureau but had no luck. She also drove around development sites to find contact details. The woman says she's now given up. A charity that stopped operating several months ago is being criticised for holding on to public funds and paying its trustees while it does nothing. The government has sought legal advice over the Quit Group, which helped people quit smoking through its helpline. The trust lost its funding last October but still has $3 million in reserves. The charity's analyst Michael Guzmay says it should give the money back.
The trust that's done its work, that should be returned to the government. I don't think the trustees should carry on trying to decide while at the same time having provided themselves a provision for being paid remuneration for that activity to use those funds when in fact their work's done. All we're doing is duplicating what the government's already doing through another program.
Michael Guzmay says the trustees should not continue to be paid where funds are desperately needed elsewhere in health. The former ACT leader John Banks has had his bid for legal costs dismissed by the High Court. Mr Banks had defended charges of filing false election returns during his failed bid to be Auckland's first supercity mayor and was initially found guilty but was later acquitted after taking the case to the Court of Appeal. The acquittal came after key evidence from 2 American businessmen was put before the court. Mr Banks had asked for $190,000 in costs to defend the case, but Justice Wiley rejected the application, pointing out that he could have called the businessmen as witnesses at his trial. In sport, the All Blacks loose forward Ardie Savea says he didn't entertain any offers to move overseas. Savea has re-signed with New Zealand Rugby and the Hurricanes to the end of 2018, joining a small group of All Blacks to have committed to New Zealand Rugby beyond next year's British and Irish Lions tour. The 22-year-old, who's made his Test debut against Wales last month, says he never considered leaving New Zealand or Wellington, as he has unfinished business with both the All Blacks and the Hurricanes.
It's quite easy for me, to stay here. There's a lot that I haven't accomplished that part of my goal. So, I want to do stuff with the Hurricanes and obviously try and further my accomplishments with the All Blacks. So, easy decision.
Savea will start at open side for the Hurricanes' final round robin match against the Crusaders in Christchurch on Saturday night. The former Wallabies captain Peter Johnson has died at his home in Sydney. He was 78. The hooker played 42 tests for the Wallabies between 1959 and 1971. St George Illawarra centre Josh Dugan will miss up to 6 weeks of the National Rugby League after breaking his jaw in New South Wales' 18-14 win over Queensland in the third and final State of Origin match. The 26-year-old was flattened by a Greg Inglis shoulder charge early in the second half. Inglis has been suspended for 3 weeks after he pleaded guilty to a Grade 2 charge. That's the news.
Britain presents a new face to the world.
It's possible for Britain to have a bigger voice in the international community if we get out from under the EU system.
The right man for the job.
On one hand, I'm highly surprised. He's not a policy expert. On the other hand, he's a man with no moral compass.
Bojo gets back his mojo.
It's a stunning development, and when I saw this, I gasped. I just could not believe it.
Bringing you the action, Guy Espiner and Philippa Tolley, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the Australian judge who chaired Victoria's Royal Commission into Family Violence. What lessons are there for New Zealand? And after 10, Catherine Switzer was the first woman to officially run the Boston Marathon. She and fellow running pioneer and her husband, Roger Robinson, on their documentary Free to Run, on the running movement over the last 50 years. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow afternoon with possible thunderstorms. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Rain spreading north tomorrow morning with squally thunderstorms easing to isolated showers in the afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, but a few showers later tomorrow. Wellington, Wairarapa, Nelson and Marlborough rain tomorrow morning or early afternoon with northwest gales. They're mostly fine. Bulla to Fiordland, showers turning to rain, heavy rain tonight with squally thunderstorms and hail, easing back to showers tomorrow with snow to 400 metres about Fiordland. Canterbury, fine apart from isolated showers tomorrow morning, northwest gales overnight tonight. Otago and Southland, westerly gales tomorrow with showers, some heavy with hail and snow to 500 metres. And the Chatham Islands, rain at times. It's coming up to 5:09.
Thanks, Katrina. A man is in a serious condition after being shot by police in Rotorua, the second police shooting in less than 48 hours. The man was shot on Tenai Road at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. Witnesses report seeing the man waving something that may have been a machete or possibly a car jack before he was shot. This follows the shooting of Hamilton man Nick Marshall on Tuesday night. Inder Singh manages the bottle store on Tenai Road, and he describes what he saw.
4 or 5 police cars, they were chasing a car, and then suddenly the car guy stopped, and he just ran over to the roundabout with the thing in his hand, and he started waving it, and the police officer told him to stay calm and get on the ground, but he didn't, so they just shot him 2 shots.
So that's the description from a witness. Part of the road is still cordoned off. Our reporter Andrew McRae is in Rotorua, having just yesterday covered the shooting there. Andrew, what more can you tell us about how this unfolded today?
Kia ora, John. A lot of the information we have at this stage is reliant on witnesses. The police are holding a press conference here at the Central Police Station in about 20 minutes' time. But what they're telling us, the witnesses are telling us, is that a car with someone in it was pursued by 4 to 5 police cars. A guy jumped out at the roundabout with Tanai and Tarawera Road. Possibly, this is unconfirmed, he ran into a shop, a mechanical workshop, and possibly threatened someone in that building, then left, and then he confronted the police on a grass verge in the middle of the road. They yelled at him to put down his weapon, which seems to be some sort of slasher, and then he was told 3 or 4 times to do that. And then, as the witnesses say, they heard 2 gunshots after that. The police provided first aid at the scene. Then the ambulance arrived. The man has been taken to Rotorua Hospital, and the hospital say he's in a serious condition.
Thanks, Andrew. We're going to leave it there for the time being because the police are going to elaborate on what Andrew was talking about, and we're going to take that media conference live when it happens. At the moment, it's scheduled to take place at about 5:30. The government has called in lawyers for advice over a charity that's holding on to millions of dollars in public funds and paying its trustees several months after it stopped operating. The Quit Group has received up to $9.5 million a year to help people quit smoking through its helpline, Quitline. But last year it lost its funding after a government agency took over Quitline. Sharon Brett-Kelly reports.
Funding ran out at the end of October, but more than 8 months later, the Trust still has $3 million in reserves. Massey University public health researcher, Associate Professor Mariwa Glover, says it should be handed back to the government now.
How can this be? Why wasn't the money spent on what it was supposed to be spent for, delivering cessation services to people? And I'm just flabbergasted.
What should happen to money like that?
I think it should go straight back to the Ministry of Health, definitely. It was meant for delivering smoking cessation services. It wasn't spent on that. Give it back.
Dr. Glover says $3 million would go a long way to helping smokers quit.
That is a lot of jobs over a number of years, $3 million. Mass media campaigns, you're probably looking at, at least $1 million for a mass media campaign. Just could have gone so far.
Auditor Grant Thornton says in the Trust's 2015 financial statement that it will continue in a dormant state while the trustees decide what to do with the $3 million. It says that ongoing costs of maintaining the Quit Group can be covered by the reserves for at least 12 months after the date the trustees approved the financial statements. A charities analyst, Michael Gume, says that means the trustees, who received $100,000 in each of the last 2 years, can continue paying themselves while the trust does nothing.
The trust has done its work. That should be returned to the government. I don't think the trustees should carry on trying to decide while at the same time having provided themselves a provision for being paid remuneration for that activity, to use those funds when in fact their work's done. All we're doing is duplicating what the government's already doing through another program.
Dr. Gume says the trustees should not be able to continue to be paid when funds are desperately needed elsewhere in health. He says the Ministry of Health should be able to claw the money back.
That would then mean, of course, that the trust has no money. That can carry on in the meantime, doing nothing, having no funds, but we need this money back in the public health system, not sitting in a bank account to pay people remuneration.
The Ministry of Health says it has sought legal advice about the Quit Group and is assessing its options. It says in some circumstances it can seek the return of any funding that is unspent. The chairman of the Quit Group, Professor Chris Cunningham, is also the chair of the Hepatitis Foundation, which is being investigated by Charity Services for potential serious wrongdoing. In an email, Mr Cunningham said the trust continues to operate and is completing its reporting for the 2015-16 financial year.
The trustees have made no decisions on the future of the trust or on the distribution of reserves. We are currently exploring initiatives that are consistent with the objects of the trust and which will contribute towards the government goal of smoke-free Aotearoa 2025.
None of the other trustees responded to calls and emails from RNZ News to explain why the Quit Group is still holding $3 million. For Checkpoint, Sharon Brett-Kelly, tēnei.
We're going to turn now to the search for an affordable home. Checkpoint keeps hearing from people who say it's basically mission impossible. We've just received an email from a person whose first initial is AA. We will be in touch with you. Thank you. That's an extraordinary email. Last night, Auckland mother Michaela said she'd given up, being unable to make contact with 12 of the 13 developers she found on the Auckland Council website. Bronwyn has been looking for an affordable home in a special housing area for the past 2 years. This is another woman. She told me earlier she's resorted to driving to each of the housing areas to look for people to speak to because she just doesn't know how to get one of the homes. She's expecting her second child and she says she's on the verge of giving up.
Initially, we were looking, we had a budget of about $550. This time round, we've gone up to $750, which would be really stretching ourselves. But we've realised $550 was unrealistic, even though that is apparently within the affordable range.
Because in the special housing areas, 10 to 20% is being set aside for properties in that kind of range.
Yeah, supposedly. But then even just looking back over some of the things available at the moment, they're saying, well, affordable rates $450 to $800K. And I think, well, who's that affordable for?
Bronwyn, how hard have you tried to find a house in a special housing area in the affordable range?
I've tried very hard. I have emailed people, I've looked on websites, I've tried to Google developers, I've looked at company registers to try and find contact details, made phone calls, gone to Citizens Advice Bureau. Yeah, I've tried hard.
And what sort of response do you get as a rule?
Generally, we don't have details. Details very limited at the moment was one response I had. The reply from the City Council said you can refer to our website. We've got a list of all the developers. It's not up to us to provide you with those details. You need to try and find them yourself.
And yet this was billed as a public response to the crisis. It was billed as a combined initiative between the government and the council. It exists under an act of parliament. It's been trumpeted as a triumph of affordability and a government and Auckland response to the situation. Mm-hmm. Is that your sense of what it is?
No, it certainly is not. It just keep on coming to dead ends. Nobody seems willing to help. Nobody seems to know anything, really. And you think, the City Council, when I went to Citizens Advice Bureau, they said, I know the person to call. And they came back to me and said, the best advice they could give was to drive past the site and hope that there was some signage up with some contact details. I've done that, and I haven't found anything.
So what are you going to do?
At the moment, we've given up. We've started looking around the country for other places we might be able to move to, and we think maybe if we wait for a couple of years, then there might be some changes, whether that be that some of these developers might actually do something with the land, or whether there might be some legal changes. We're just crossing our fingers, really, and hoping that we're making the right decision. We've worked hard to save a deposit, and we really thought here was a possible solution. But even just talking with people my own age, people trying to find their first home, and incidentally, I'm not in my early 20s, I'm in my late 30s. They're coming up with the same struggle, so it's been really hard.
That's Bronwyn. Reports of a big fire in Christchurch. Our reporter is heading there. We will cross to him as soon as we can. Right, we asked our reporter Jessie Chang to find out how hard it was to track down special housing area developers. She searched the web for 9 companies with reasonably large developments and could only find contact details for 3. So she posed as a first-time buyer and ran an Auckland Council customer service team to see if they could track the developers down. Jessie spent more than 20 minutes on the phone getting the information. She asked about Harper Mitchell Investments, who are building 101 homes on Te Atatu Road. The operator told her he had no record of the developer in the system. Then she asked about Knights Investments, who plan to build 700 homes, no record in the system. Stevenson Group, who are building 1,000 homes in Drury, no record in the system. The council told her they don't actually have the contact numbers of any of the developers, only their names, and it was up to the individuals themselves to find those details. Remember, special housing areas were created under the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Act, introduced to Parliament in May 2013, described by the Minister, Nick Smith, at the time as a core part of the government's work to improve housing affordability. The pin-up development for how they might work is Hobsonville Point. For those of you who don't know Auckland, you head to the end of the Northwestern Motorway, turn right and out into land that was recently really lifestyle and even semi-rural. It's a mixed price community. 20% of the homes being built there are affordable by current definitions. I went out there today and asked Precinct Director Katja Lights what affordable is.
So for us that means at or below 550,000. So half of the 20%, so 10% of everything we build is at 450,000, then another 5% at 500,000 and another 5% at 550.
And so the other 80% are selling in a range of what?
It's a really big range. So from the affordable at 450, we've got homes right up to 1.6 million and above.
And this is a Housing New Zealand development, right?
It's a Hobsonville Land Company development, so we're a Crown-owned entity, so we're owned by Housing New Zealand, but we are a separate company.
So Housing New Zealand, through Hobsonville Land Company, is now building homes for $1.6 million?
Yes, or our builder partners are building homes up to that price.
And is this proving to be a profitable business for Housing New Zealand? How much money is coming out of Hobsonville Point and heading up the pipes to Housing New Zealand? And do you know what the profit is? What's the most recent figure?
No, I don't have those figures on me.
If we look at the developers, they seem on the face of it to be doing quite nicely out of it. I've got AV Jennings' latest half-year report to the year ended December 31st, and they say in it that that there's significant demand generating excellent revenue and margins. In other words, the Crown is making money, Housing New Zealand, the developers are making money. Are margins being driven as tightly as they could be here?
That is an interesting question. We do want our partners to have profitable businesses here. A really important aspect of Hobsonville Point from the beginning was to set an exemplar. So we do want to demonstrate what the industry can do, and in order for other people to be able to do similar developments, it does need to be profitable for those partners that are involved in it.
It's proving fairly profitable for some of the developers. Some of them are doing really nicely out of it, aren't they?
It's hard to say. I don't get the feeling that people are making super margins. We all know that the property market is very hot at the moment. But I suppose what we have set out to prove, and I think what we are proving, is that you can build affordable homes in the Auckland market and that you're still able to make a profit doing so.
So 20% of the homes at Hobsonville Point are affordable. How many of those homes are occupied? So how many access homes, affordable homes, somewhere in the range of 450 to 550, are now being lived in?
Probably somewhere between 100 and 150. We don't keep those numbers separate, but I do know that there's over 700 homes completed. So at 20% of those, it's somewhere between 100 and 150.
Now, I'm not giving you a hard time here because this development is a phenomenal success. And I've been wandering around this morning talking to people who are stoked about living here, who bought properties 2 or 3 years ago and are thrilled about, the gains they've made, people who are desperate to get in. So Hobsonville Point is a success story. But in terms of providing affordable homes, 100 to 150 so far in real terms that people are actually living in isn't a major solution to the crisis of affordability in Auckland, is it?
No, of course not. Hobsonville Point won't be the solution to Auckland's housing issues. But in the context of, ultimately 600 to 700 homes, we do think we make a substantial difference. And I think even more so perhaps, I think that the fact that we are showing that it is possible and that it is profitable to do this really, I suppose, gives us hope that other people will copy it.
how do you get in? How do you get one of the affordable homes in the range of 450 to 550? How do you get on the list?
So we do have a situation where there's more people wanting these houses than there are houses, and so what we do is that we work with all our builder partners to run ballots. So the process is that you come and visit Hobsonville Point, you see the builder partners, you talk to them about what affordable houses they have available, and if you're then interested, then you put your name into a ballot. Another factor here at Hobsonville Point is that you have to meet a number of criteria. So most of the affordable homes go to first home buyers. You need to commit to live in them for 2 years, and that is really to deal with, I suppose, the risks of speculations and people just buying them as an investment. You can't buy them in a trust. You have to be a New Zealand resident or citizen, and so forth. So we're fairly tight on the criteria, and once you meet those criteria, you then go into a ballot. And if you are fortunate enough to be pulled out, then you're offered a home.
So does the Hobsonville Land Company, owned by Housing New Zealand, run that ballot, or did the developers, the individual developers, run that ballot?
So the individual builders run the ballots. We are very clear that it is the builder partners and the developers that are building and selling the homes, so we want them to have the relationship with the customer. So they run the ballots, but generally the scenario is that one of us from our office comes along and supervises the ballot to make sure everything is in order. And we keep an eye on the process, and we've set the process out for them.
So how many builder partners do you have?
We've got, I don't know that note off the top of my head. I think we've got 7 or 8 at the moment.
If you're 28 years old, you have household income of less than $120,000 a year, you've got some KiwiSaver, you're a New Zealand resident, and you're eligible for access, rather than dealing with the Hobsonville Land Company to get out here and get one of these really sought after properties, you've got to deal with 7 or 8 different developers.
Yes, you do, but we do have the information centre where we're at now, which is operated by us, so you can come here and you can find out which builders have got homes coming up, so that you can go and see those builders, and all the builders have show homes just on the street behind us, so it's fairly easy, and there's a website and it takes you through to the different builders, but you do need to engage with a builder who ultimately will be selling you a home, so that you can find out what they require of you and what the plans are like and so on.
That's Precinct Director Katja Lights from Hobsonville Point. We're going to go live to Rotorua now, where the police are holding a media conference.
The man then walked off and the officer called for assistance. The man was followed to Merino Road, where he was approached by further police staff at a commercial premises. After multiple requests asking the man to drop his weapon, police sprayed the man with OC spray. It had no effect. Staff then deployed taser 3 times in an effort to incapacitate the man, with each attempt being unsuccessful. The man has then walked off towards Tenai Road in the direction of the shopping centre, still armed with the slasher. Following further warnings by police, an armed officer has then shot the man. He shot him twice. Police staff provided immediate assistance, first aid at the scene, until ambulance staff arrived and transported the man to hospital, where he is receiving further medical treatment. Based on the information we know at this time, we believe that the man was affected by a substance, possibly methamphetamine. Police have now launched an investigation into the circumstances leading up to the man being shot. As a standard practice, police have notified the Independent Police Complaints Authority of the incident. Police are aware that there are a significant number of people who may have witnessed the incident, and we're asking anyone with information or footage of the event to contact us to help us build a more detailed picture of what has occurred.
Can you tell us what condition the man is in at the moment at hospital?
He's just undergone surgery and is in a critical condition.
Where was he shot?
He was shot in the stomach.
Both shots in the stomach?
Yes, 2 shots to the stomach.
What are the injuries to the police?
Nil injuries to the police.
Was he thought to be approaching police when he was shot, or...?
Yes, he was approaching police and he was asked to actually drop his weapon, which he didn't do.
We've had some witness statements saying that the man was shot too soon and that there could have been more to handle the situation a bit better. What would you say to those statements?
No, that's incorrect. It's very easy in hindsight to judge these matters. He was approaching a shopping centre which was full of members of the public.
Is this man known to police?
He is.
So one of the reports said that the policeman was seen holding his head after being hit for something. Is that not correct?
No, I'm unsure.
When he went into the commercial premise, did he threaten any staff there, or?
He was waving the slash around, and they are quite traumatised by the event itself as well. And we're offering them victim support.
Do you know the age of the man?
No, I couldn't tell you that at the time.
Is he a local?
He is a local.
How's the officer doing to find this?
I've actually spoken to him. He's very upset by the whole incident. You know, we've got police staff that come to work every day to actually prevent crime and to actually make our communities feel safe. And when they have to resort to this level, you know, using deadly force, it's not a situation we want to be in. He's very upset.
Why were the tasers so ineffective?
It may have been because the man was... basically, he was acting in a very violent, aggressive manner, and it may have been the effect of the substance as to why the tasers weren't effective. We're carrying out an investigation at the moment, and we'll know a lot more detail later on.
How concerning is it that spray nor taser could actually halt this man?
Very concerning, and the fact you have to use deadly force or potentially deadly force, i.e. shooting the person, you know, it's very concerning. But we know that people that are affected by the likes of methamphetamine, the spray and the tasers, as we've probably noticed today, had no effect.
All right, any more questions?
That's Superintendent Andy McGregor, who was the Bay of Plenty District Commander. He was holding that media conference outside the police headquarters in Rotorua. If we hear any more about the condition of the man who's been shot, we will go back immediately to Rotorua. The second police shooting in the space of less than 48 hours. OK, the time on Checkpoint is 5:31. Lots coming up. Reports of a multi-storey building on fire in Christchurch Central. Lots and lots of fire engines in attendance, and our reporter is just arriving there. We will go live to him very shortly. Grey Power fighting for the right to grow cannabis. Residents of a New Plymouth suburb filled with dozens of derelict Housing New Zealand homes say they're feeling increasingly unsafe in their own homes. And much more coming up before 6, but let's go to Katrina with the headlines.
As you've just heard live from a police news conference in Rotorua, a man armed with a slasher has been shot twice by police at a busy intersection in Rotorua this afternoon. It's the second shooting by police in 2 days. Nick Marshall was fatally shot during a drugs and weapons raid on a Hamilton property on Tuesday night. A family of 8 children and 2 adults have been left devastated after a fire ripped through their state house in Mangere in Auckland. Smoke alarms alerted them to the blaze. The fire service says the fire has gone from end to end of the house, damaging most of its contents and its structure. More buyers have told RNZ they're struggling to contact developers about promised affordable housing in Auckland's special housing areas. The areas were created to increase the housing supply in the city, and most developments are required to include a percentage of affordable homes. A charity that stopped operating several months ago has been criticised for holding on to public funds and paying its trustees while it does nothing. The government has sought legal advice over the Quit Group, which helped people quit smoking through its helpline. The trust lost its funding last October, but it still has $3 million in reserves. The head of the local Grey Power chapter pushing for the legalisation of medicinal cannabis is standing by her group despite opposition from the national organisation. The Otamatea chapter of Grey Power unanimously voted in May to start a petition supporting legalisation. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Let's go to business now with Jonathan Mitchell in Wellington. Jonathan, you've been looking at some pieces of economic data.
That's right. We've had manufacturing, job ads and consumer confidence all showing the economy has some quite solid momentum. Let's look at manufacturing first, holding up pretty well. New orders are keeping manufacturers pretty busy, hitting the highest level in over a year. There's still some quite solid momentum for employment and production levels, but it just goes to show manufacturers are still feeling quite confident at home. They're shaking off things like Brexit and the high dollar compared with the US and Australia.
How are consumers feeling? There's some data on that today, is there, Jonathan?
That's right. It eased a touch, but is still sitting at quite historically high levels. The labour market is obviously improving. Migration is strong too. Consumers feel better off financially, so they're going out and buying big ticket items around the home. Those house price expectations did rise. There are some downfalls to that. Confidence fell in Auckland. Obviously, first home buyers feeling the blues there. But overall, consumer confidence is holding up pretty well.
What's happening in the labour market too? Boy, this is comprehensive. What do we know about the labour market?
That's right. We had some more data from RNZ on its monthly job ads. It rose. Internet advertising did rise, but newspapers fell. There was a bit of differentiation throughout the regions. Auckland ads are up, Wellington too. Canterbury is edging back. In the regions, there are some strong performers out there, the likes of Otago, Manawatu, Waikato and Hawke's Bay. And it goes to show that, you know, employers are looking for new employees out there, especially in regions not only hit by the Auckland housing market, but, you know, further south.
Thanks, Jonathan. What were the numbers today?
Well, just to note, we did have a fall in the New Zealand dollar. The Reserve Bank came out this afternoon. They're going to provide an economic assessment next week. That took the market by surprise. Obviously, there's a lot happening at the moment. Brexit, the New Zealand economy is performing reasonably well. You've got the housing market and the dollar strengthening, so we're likely to get some sort of update. The NZX 50 index did hit some record territory again today, up 16 points to 7080. The dollar did fall back on the news that the Reserve Bank will come out next week, tracking lower at 72.16 US cents and 94.66 Australian. John.
Thank you so much, Jonathan Mitchell. Very busy old Checkpoint tonight. We're going to go live now to our reporter, Conan Young, who's at the scene of a fire right in the CBD of... Where are you there, Conan? Where are you? Right in downtown Christchurch?
Hi John, yeah look, I'm on Manchester Street. I don't know if you can see behind me, but we're right in front of where this fire is happening now. It's actually in an abandoned building, or an abandoned sort of network of buildings. People in Christchurch will know it as Soul Square. It was a real entertainment hub at one stage. It's been abandoned since the earthquakes, however, and so now it's just a job for firefighters to stop this fire from reaching the office blocks that have sort of sprung up, you know, very close by to this network of buildings. So that's the job they're doing at the moment.
We can hear lots of sirens in the background, but I can also see lots of smoke that looks like the work of hoses rather than hot flames. So are they getting on top of it there? Is that your sense, Conan?
Yeah, exactly. And actually we could feel sort of the water from the hoses just sort of sprinkling down on us before, and it's a totally clear night, so it was definitely the hoses and not the rain. And look, we could even see sort of ash falling from some of the fire before as well. So yeah, a real job actually for the firefighters to get on top of this, I would imagine, given I remember going into the Soul Square, this network of sort of pubs and whatnot before the earthquakes, and it's a real rabbit warren, so it could be a really difficult fire for these firefighters to get on top of.
Thanks, Conan. We really appreciate it. The fire people down there have told us 8 engines are in attendance. There is a sense, though, that they are getting on top of it, despite the difficulties of the site, as Conan was describing. Let's go to London. The new British Prime Minister, Theresa May, has just spent her first night at number 10 Downing Street. But before her first day as the head of the country was through, she'd named 6 new cabinet ministers, including, surprisingly, the face of the Brexit Leave campaign, Boris Johnson. In a speech outside her new residence, Mrs May, who voted to remain in the EU, of course, said she's determined to make Britain exit from the European Union a success.
We are living through an important moment in our country's history. Following the referendum, we face a time of great national change. And I know, because we're Great Britain, that we will rise to the challenge. As we leave the European Union, we will forge a bold, new, positive role for ourselves in the world. And we will make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every one of us. That will be the mission of the government I lead. And together, We will build a better Britain.
Our correspondent Dan Whitehead joins us now on Skype video from London. Hi Dan, welcome to Checkpoint. Lovely to have you with us. Boy, oh boy, I guess this is the situation for her, but she's not wasting any time. She's already sorting her cabinet out. Boris Johnson, an extraordinary call on the face of it. How is all this being received?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, many people hadn't predicted Boris Johnson would perhaps be the Foreign Secretary. However, she was under immense pressure to get some Leave campaigners in those top jobs, and we have 3 Leave campaigners in these senior cabinet positions. We also have David Davis, who is a staunch Eurosceptic. He's going to head up this new unit, the Brexit department within Whitehall, within government here of the UK, leading those negotiations. So she's been under pressure to get those Leave campaigners in because, of course, Theresa May campaigned for the UK to stay within the EU, and many Eurosceptics within the party weren't happy with that.
Dan, I'm fascinated. The audio clip we were just listening to, she said that she wasn't going to govern for a privileged few. And so not only does she have to manage Brexit, she has to manage the sense of alienation and disconnection that was part of the vote. And she's got to say this will not be a Tory government that is disconnected. This will not be a Tory government that ignores the problems at the bottom of the socio-economic heap. Does she have support for that kind of rhetoric?
Well, do you know what? That is the big question, and it really remains to be seen just what the unity message is. Boris Johnson, though, saying as he arrived back home last night that he agrees completely with all sentiments of Theresa May's message. But it was very telling to hear those words from Theresa May, because it's a departure from the austerity government, which we saw under David Cameron. We heard words that, you know, the decisions and any new laws which would be passed in the UK would not be made for the mighty and the wealthy, and whatever your background, help will be given to you, which is really, you know, not the sort of message that we have heard so directly in the past from Conservative governments. So there is certainly a shift. We have to wait and see whether or not it's just rhetoric at this moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Boy, it's a frantic old pace over there at the moment, Dan. What else did she get up to in her first day in the job?
Well, I mean, she was only in the door at 6 o'clock, and within an hour and a half, as you say, she'd appointed 6 cabinet ministers. So she didn't mess around. She did, as you mentioned, called a number of EU heads of state, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President François Hollande, the Irish Taoiseach Enda Kenny. The message that she gave to them was that she emphasised her commitment to delivering the will of the British people to leave the EU. She said as well that we would need some time, the UK would need some time to prepare for these negotiations. And she also told those EU leaders of her hope that these negotiations could be conducted in a constructive and positive spirit. So no major detail. I think today we've still got a lot of cabinet positions to be filled, health sector, education, work and pensions. Expect to see some more women in the cabinet, because only at the minute there's only one and her. So I think we'll see some more high-profile women and some more Leave campaigners being introduced to the cabinet.
Dan Whitehead live from London via Skype video. Thanks, Dan. We really appreciate the update. Boy, it is all moving so fast. Let's head home. Grey Power members wanting to plant marijuana between their broccoli and their spinach are standing firm in the face of mounting opposition from within their own organisation. An internal stoush appears to be spilling into the public arena after Grey Power's national president allegedly rang the head of the Cannabis Party and threatened to go to war over the issue. The Northland chapter, which voted unanimously to back a petition calling for the legalisation of cannabis, insists it wasn't pressured into anything. Kate Pereira Garcia reports.
When members of Grey Power's Otamatea branch saw their dying friend so doped up on morphine that he couldn't recognise his own family, they decided there had to be a better way. The budding medical researchers settled on cannabis.
He could have actually died smoking a toki, or whatever you like to call it, so that he would be able to recognise his family. His family could be with him at their last. He would be lucid and everything would have been lovely for them. But they had that terrible experience. Now, this is not a one-only case. This is multiplied amongst us.
Beverly Aldridge is the president of the Otamatea chapter. She's convinced people should have the right to grow and use cannabis.
You can actually put the leaves into your smoothies, and all over the world they've done research and found that cannabis is such a wonderful plant. From the history of it, that it's only been a United Nations Accord in 1961 that actually agreed to make it illegal. Then all of a sudden it was demonised and we were told how bad it was. But with our research now, we find that we've actually been sold a crock. It's a really helpful herb, just the same as, I suppose, oregano and broccoli and all these things.
But while the Northland Group is pushing green, Grey Power's national president Tom O'Connor is seeing red. He says weird and wonderful ideas pop up from time to time, but the National Federation is not behind this one. He blames activists and single-issue groups for using Grey Power to promote their cause. The head of the Cannabis Party, Abe Gray, says Mr O'Connor called him in a rage yesterday.
The guy introduced himself as Tom O'Connor from Grey Power, and I said, "Oh, I'm so glad you rung me. I was about to ring you." And he said, "Well, no, you're not." And then he launched into a tirade, essentially accusing me and others of taking advantage of his poor, feeble, naive members and brainwashing them into supporting cannabis.
Beverly Aldridge said she didn't even know the Cannabis Party existed. And Mr Gray says the first he heard of the debate was on RNZ. But he could barely get a word in to tell Mr O'Connor that.
He was pretty much too busy, throwing insults and making threats. And I asked him, well, isn't this your members that are, putting forth, an issue that they're interested in? Isn't it up to your membership? And he was saying not as long as he was president, and it didn't matter what his members were interested in. He was never going to let Grey Power be taken over by cannabis bullshit, as he called it.
Beverly Aldridge says they're not trying to speak for anyone else.
At our ages, you've got to gather some wisdom and run with what you know. I mean, the world was flat once, and there was a lot of argument, wasn't there, saying the world was round. Well, we're saying that the cannabis plant is a good plant.
A plant that's sure to keep debate ablaze. For Checkpoint, ko Kate Pereira Garcia tēnei.
Residents of a New Plymouth suburb filled with dozens of derelict Housing New Zealand properties say they feel increasingly unsafe in their own homes. In recent days, abandoned homes have been broken into and stripped of copper wiring, hot water cylinders and anything of value. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has been in Marfell.
Broken glass, corrugated iron and rubbish litter the entrances to Housing New Zealand's deserted Marfell stock. Window frames bang in the wind, the glass long since smashed out of them. Sri Lankan immigrant Madhushani Bandera, her young child and husband came to New Zealand for a better life, but this is the world she finds herself surrounded by. She feels unsafe and wants out of the neighbourhood.
I think it's not a secure place in here because last month our vehicle also damaged by some people, so it's not secure here. We also want to move another place.
Ms Bandara says the abandoned homes are a magnet for crime and have been systematically ransacked.
We saw that young boys go around that houses and stealing something. I think they collect some iron things and like that way, like cloth racks like that, and gates.
In 2008, 28 state houses were demolished in Marfell, and in 2012, 20 more families were moved out to make way for a redevelopment which never happened. Housing New Zealand has just demolished 4 more units, but it still has about 30 vacant properties in the neighbourhood. A local resident who only wanted to be known as Abo says leaving the houses empty for so long was asking for trouble.
Oh, it's bullshit, ripping it off and shit, but they let the houses go to ruin. They could have rented them out. There's a lot of people out there that need them. No money, got to do something, I guess, eh? Young kids have got nothing to do. There's nothing around here for them, so yeah, young kids are going to break a window and stuff. I'm sure you did when you were a kid, I did.
The Marfell Community Police Officer, Sergeant Terry Johnson, says the free-for-all began after a Housing New Zealand contractor allowed residents to help themselves to demolition material.
Obviously the scrap metal or the copper had gone from the legitimate houses that were being wrecked, and then we had a spate of a number of other empty houses that were burgled, and hot water cylinders and copper was stolen from them.
Sergeant Johnson says the scavengers left a trail of destruction behind them.
We visited a number of these properties that had obviously been broken into. Hot water cylinders that still had water connected in them had just been cut off. There was water pouring out of some of the houses. There'd been holes knocked in all the walls where obviously they were looking for copper piping, which was stripped.
In a statement, Housing New Zealand's regional manager Darren Toy says it is disappointed at the vandalism of its Marfell properties.
Vacant properties can unfortunately attract vandalism, and some properties did have items stolen from them.
We understand that incidents like this can cause concern for some residents. We can assure them that we are taking action to deter vandalism, including working with police who are investigating the incident. We will also be installing security measures in the properties.
Mr Toy says the Crown Agency is not wiping its hands of the area.
We are fully committed to helping make Marfell a vibrant, attractive suburb, and we have been engaging with the local community, suppliers and partner agencies on how this can be achieved. More state housing is not necessarily the right approach, so we have been looking at a range of options to help create a sustainable community.
Local resident Albo reckons the answer is simple.
They could keep the houses cheap, do them back up. If the tenants wreck the places, kick them out for sure, but if they're going to look after the houses, keep them in there. Big area here for playgrounds, kindy, anything, you know. If it was a good area once, it could be again.
In the meantime, Housing New Zealand is encouraging residents to call the police if they see any suspicious or illegal activity. For Checkpoint, call Robin Martin Tene.
Kia ora, Robin. A short time ago, Housing New Zealand released a statement. It says it's working with police to find those responsible and there will be increased security in the area. 5:10 to 6, the Commerce Commission has made public many of the submissions they've received about the merger of NZME, publishers of the New Zealand Herald and owners of numerous radio stations, including Newstalk ZB, and newspaper publishers Fairfax, whose dailies include the Don Post, the Press, the Waikato Times and many more. The submissions strongly oppose the merger, and one of them is from Horton Media. Its CEO, Matthew Horton, from the Horton family, who used to own the New Zealand Herald. They too oppose the merger. In part it's because they're keen to buy some of the community newspapers included in it. But Matthew Horton also believes New Zealand needs more than one major newspaper owner and that both Fairfax and NZME are better and sounder assets than we're being told.
We think that they are still wonderful assets. We think they've been very, very poorly run. We think the decisions that have been made, mainly in Australia, have not suited New Zealand, and the outcome has been, very emaciated, sort of an increasingly poor newspapers.
Right, the pro-merger inference, I guess, is that if the merger doesn't go through, one or both of these newspaper businesses may potentially go under. Do you think that's the case?
Actually, it's laughable. When you look at the revenues and profitabilities of those businesses, digital makes up something like 3% of their combined turnover. These businesses together turn over something like $800 million. They make $133 million, sort of separately at the moment. Which constitutes something like 46% of the entire media sector's profitability in New Zealand. So digital actually plays virtually no part in the profitability of those businesses. That's not to say that they haven't geared their businesses in a way so as to grow digital. And look, it's undeniable. People will increasingly seek news online and digest it from online sources, but there doesn't appear to be any profitable model for the dissemination of news online.
Right.
So look, the model that they've chosen is, let's give the content away, hope that we get enough scale on the internet to attract advertisers. And that's the model that, Google uses in a slightly different way using search, and Facebook uses using social media content and aggregated content. And it's clearly very successful for them because they dominate 50% of the revenues on the internet. But for newspapers, notwithstanding the fact that they are very significant players online, the Herald and Stuff are both within the top 10 websites in New Zealand. I think it might be number 4 and number 6 or something like that. They have failed to get any traction with advertisers.
So you find the commercial argument simply not persuasive. And I know that there are other factors that are shaping your submission, but what will be the cost in terms of the way we see ourselves?
I think it'll be enormous, John. It was interesting. I was speaking to an advertiser, a very large advertiser the other day, an advertiser who comes from within the largest single revenue segment for both newspapers, which is the property industry. And he said, and everyone in New Zealand is, naturally besotted with property, and it's almost the primary dinner table conversation topic, as you know. And so what's represented in the newspapers about property is of great importance and an interest to most readers. And he was saying, well, at the moment, if we get, a wholly negative story printed about our industry or about us or something like that in this paper, if there was a merger, we would have nowhere to turn to have an alternative view aired. And right now they can do that, and they do that. It's not. And newspapers aren't perfect. They don't always get it right the first time, and what happens right now is if you printed something that was wholly wrong, then the best you could expect if the newspaper was to acknowledge that it was wrong was sort of some little piece on page 2 which everyone ignores. So in actual fact, your best restitution is to try and find someone who will put an alternative point of view. And right now, you have the choice between the Fairfax assets and the NZME assets.
Do you think this merger will go ahead?
I don't know. If you gauge it by public reaction, you would have to be gravely concerned, because I really can't detect much more than, at best, some sort of apathetic acceptance that these broad notions of the internet, dominating the media in the future and newspapers falling by the wayside. That seems to have taken hold on people's minds, and certainly, it seems to be an easily, understood story. But there is, in actual fact, if you look at it closely, no rationale, absolutely no commercial rationale other than convenience for the two to merge.
5 minutes to 6, that's Matthew Horton, the CEO of Horton Media, whose submission is obviously very much against the merger. This is quite extraordinary. The Auschwitz Museum is warning Pokemon Go players to stay away as a mark of respect to those who died in the concentration camp. The fact that people will go hunting for Pokemon there is unbelievable, but also a sign, I guess, of how big this thing is becoming. Back here, people already hooked on the Pokemon Go app are doing radical things to catch them all, and one of them is Tom Curry, a 24-year-old Aucklander who recently quit his job, booked 20 buses up and down the country, and is trying to catch basically every Pokemon going. Our journey begins on the west coast near Westport, where Tom's dad lives. I asked him via Skype video where the most remote place he'd caught a Pokemon was.
The remotest, probably where I started, in Charleston, walking along the beach and wondering how the game worked because I didn't have any Pokestops or gyms around, and caught a couple of Pokemon there. So.
And in Charleston, there's Pokemon in Charleston.
There's Pokemon everywhere, Campbell.
It's bizarre. And so what's the end game? The end game, according to the notes I've got from Natasha, is Mewtwo. Is that a dude? Is that a Pokemon dude?
Yes, Mewtwo and Mew, 150 and 151, the last two Pokemon for the first generation. And I think that's all that Pokemon's released so far. So,
and are there
fewer
of them? Are they like the king in chess? Is there fewer of them?
Absolutely. Pokemon released a promo video for Mewtwo, and it showed thousands of people in New York Times Square, all on their phones in a big battle together, fighting for this Mewtwo. So I think that they're going to do something similar to that, where they'll get everybody in the same area has a chance to catch this super rare Pokemon. So hopefully I'm in the right spot at the right time when that happens.
Tom, I'm going to do an unusual thing while we talk to you. Kelvin, come back to me on camera. I'm going to keep talking to Tom. And then, Kelvin, can you take a shot of the studio on camera, whatever that studio camera is, the control room? So the three people who are listening to this in the control room are all under 30, right? And they're laughing out loud at me, Tom, because I know so little about this. And they're being contemptuous and derisory through the glass. And so, can we go back to Tom? Tom, I'm 52 years old, and I haven't a bloody clue what you're doing or why you're doing it. But what I can tell is you're not doing anyone any harm, and you're having a lot of fun, right?
Exactly. I've spent the last 2 days in Christchurch hanging out with friends I haven't seen in years. I never would have come here otherwise. Yeah, been great catching up. We've been going on carpooling Pokemon hunts to all the best spots. Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. Like I said, I'm in the city right now having a look around. I haven't been to Christchurch in 2 years, so it's amazing to see the progress and the lack of progress here and there. Yeah.
And the phone you're talking to us on is your Pokemon phone, is it?
Yes, this is my specially bought. I got a Samsung Galaxy S5. It's got a brilliant camera for all my scenic shots, and it's waterproof, which will help in the New Zealand winter if I get rained out.
And Tom, your objective is to get them all?
Yes, I want to catch all 151, and hopefully when they release the new ones, I'll still be into it then. I would say so.
And do you get a prize, Tom? Is there a prize?
The prize is being the very best Pokemon trainer. There's millions of us out there now, so everybody, wants to be the best, and as far as I can see so far, I'm doing pretty well.
Good luck, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom Curry, when we were kids, it was just called a road trip, wasn't it? Now it's a Pokemon hunt. Katrina Batten is sitting here crossing her eyes. But in fact, he's just on a roadie, the lad, looking for Pokemon, as you do. Apparently they're not called Pokemon dudes, they're just called Pokemon. Thanks for pointing that out, everyone. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. We really do appreciate receiving your feedback. Thank you for it, even if it's just to teach me about Pokemon etiquette. Our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Our text number is 2101, and don't forget our Twitter and Facebook pages. Time for the pips. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for being with us. In the next 30 minutes, calls for police to start wearing body-mounted cameras following the second police shooting in 48 hours. Some quite differing versions of events, particularly from Hamilton. A man is in a critical condition after he was shot by police this afternoon near Rotorua Shopping Centre. Katrina has more on that coming up, and so do we. A new report has criticised how the Ministry of Education handled the post-earthquake Christchurch school reshuffle. And the AA calls for a ban on wheel clamping amidst growing complaints against the practice. All of that and more in the next 29 minutes. But first, RNZ News with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The police tasered and pepper sprayed a man wielding a slasher in Rotorua before they shot and critically injured him this afternoon. The local man was shot twice by the police off Tangai Road about 1 o'clock. The police say he was holding a 4-foot-long slasher and acting violently. They believe he may be under the influence of methamphetamine. The Bay of Plenty District Commander, Superintendent Andy McGregor, says the man was told to drop his weapon several times before taking action.
Police sprayed the man with OC spray. It had no effect. Staff then deployed taser 3 times, with each attempt being unsuccessful. The man has then walked off towards Tenai Road in the direction of the shopping centre. Following further warnings by police, an armed officer has then shot the man.
The man has undergone surgery at Rotorua Hospital. More buyers have told RNZ they're struggling to contact developers about promised affordable housing in Auckland's special housing areas. The areas were created to increase the housing supply in the city, and most developments are required to include a percentage of affordable homes. An Auckland woman, Bronwyn, told Checkpoint she phoned Auckland Council, but a staff member said it was not up to them to provide the developers' details and she would have to find them herself.
I have emailed people, I've looked on websites, I've tried to Google developers, I've looked at company registers to try and find contact details, made phone calls, gone to Citizens Advice Bureau.
Bronwyn says she even drove around development sites to find contact details. A South Auckland family has been left devastated after fire destroyed their home this afternoon. The fire engulfed the single-storey state house on Archboyd Avenue in Mangere shortly before 1:30. 2 adults and 8 children escaped unharmed thanks to smoke alarms. Specialist fire investigator Philip Faidley says the fire has gone from end to end of the house, damaging most of its contents and its structure. But he says it would have been very different if there hadn't been smoke alarms installed. More than 8 fire trucks are fighting a fire in a multi-storey derelict building in central Christchurch. Fire Service Communications says the blaze in the Tuam Street building has escalated quickly. Our reporter Conan Young says the area is a real rabbit warren of abandoned pubs and other buildings.
It's actually in an abandoned building or an abandoned sort of network of buildings. People in Christchurch will know it as Soul Square. It was a real entertainment hub at one stage. It's been abandoned since the earthquakes, however, and so now it's just a job for firefighters to stop this fire from reaching the office blocks that have sort of sprung up, very close by to this network of buildings. So that's the job they're doing at the moment.
Conan Young describing the scene to John Campbell. Tuam and Litchfield streets are closed between Manchester and Colombo streets. Motorists are advised to avoid the central city and use Morehouse Avenue instead. British Prime Minister Theresa May has appointed senior Conservative Party member David Davis to lead the country's negotiations to exit the European Union. Mr Davis takes up the newly created role of Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. In an article for Conservative website Conservative Home, David Davis, who was a strong supporter of Brexit, said Britain should take its time before triggering Article 50, the formal mechanism for leaving the EU. Mr Davis was beaten by former Prime Minister David Cameron in the party's 2005 leadership election contest. St John, New Zealand says the fee it charges for emergency ambulance call-outs is about 1/10 of the actual cost. The charity has come under fire from the Aged Care Association for raising the cost of an emergency call-out from $88 to $98. Its chief executive, Peter Bradley, says St John relies on donations, workshops and emergency call-out charges for 30% of its budget. Mr Bradley says St John has to charge the fee to stay afloat.
The cost to run the ambulance service is going up year on year, and the demands on our service are going up. We rely on public fundraising, support from the government, also our part charge. And so to make sure that we balance our books, we've had to increase our part charge, what we believe is a relatively modest increase for an emergency ambulance by $10.
Peter Bradley says a typical emergency call-out costs St John over $600. In sport, Americans have won the last 6 Opens played at Royal Troon, and golf world number 2, Dustin Johnson, is favoured to make it 7 on the trot starting tonight. Johnson won the US Open in June, racking up his first major championship, and followed that with victory 2 weeks ago at the WGC Bridgestone Invitational. Nick Dye reports.
It's the impeccable turnout you'd expect, with Jason Day, number 1 in the world, next best Dustin Johnson arguably playing better than anyone after the US Open and WGC victories. Jordan Spieth is almost always a threat, and Rory McIlroy returns, having missed last year's Open. He's practised repeatedly at Troon over the last week, learning the places to go and, critically, the places not to go. It's a very traditional links course. 9 holes go out with the sea to the right, turn and come home, often into the wind. The weather is likely to be testing. Every facet of one's game is examined. Zach Johnson defends his title against a who's who of golf.
Nick Dye reporting. The All Blacks loose forward Ardie Savea says he has unaccomplished goals in New Zealand rugby. Savea has re-signed with New Zealand Rugby and the Hurricanes to the end of 2018. The 22-year-old, who made his Test debut against Wales last month, says he never considered leaving New Zealand or Wellington, as he wants to help lift the Hurricanes to their maiden Super Rugby title and further his All Blacks ambitions. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Pope, official UFO investigator. Yeah, I can already hear some of you saying it's a cover-up. Simon Morris reviews the latest Steven Spielberg effort, an adaptation of Roald Dahl's BFG. We have a window on the world of the gay black singer Sylvester James. He had the power of funk. And Paul Spain explains the augmented reality behind Pokemon Go, the game that's turning smartphone users into zombies. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7. on RNZ National.
Oh, that Pokemon, it's everywhere. Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow afternoon with possible thunderstorms. So you can't go out Pokemoning tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Rain spreading north tomorrow morning with squally thunderstorms easing to isolated showers in the afternoon again. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, but a few showers later tomorrow, so do it in the morning. Wellington, Wairarapa, Nelson and Marlborough. Rain tomorrow morning or early afternoon with northwest gales, then mostly fine. Bulletu Fiordland, showers turning to heavy rain tonight with squally thunderstorms and hail easing back to showers tomorrow with snow to 400 metres about Fiordland. Canterbury, fine apart from isolated showers tomorrow morning, northwest gales overnight on tonight. Otago and Southland, westerly gales tomorrow with showers, some heavy with hail and snow to 500 metres. And the Chatham Islands, rain at times. It's 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Just received an email from Richard saying, "Hi John, in any quickly evolving crime scene there will always be variances in the accounts given by witnesses." Ain't that the truth? Police and traffic wardens in multiple jurisdictions now wear body cameras so they can capture any incidents of threatening behaviour on film. The cameras can capture both video and sound in high definition. Why not here? Well, Richard, that's a remarkably prescient question of you. Thank you. We're going to try and answer that in about 3 minutes because we are going to return now to the story RNZ News is leading with a man shot by police in Rotorua. He is in critical condition. We will update you if we hear any more on that. The police say he was wielding a slasher knife and heading towards a shopping centre when they fired at him on Tenai Road at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. They also say they used pepper spray and a taser before the shooting. At a media conference about 40 minutes ago, Superintendent Andy McGregor said it appears the man was under the influence of drugs, likely methamphetamine, when he was shot.
After multiple requests asking the man to drop his weapon, police sprayed the man with OC spray. It had no effect. Staff then deployed taser 3 times in an effort to incapacitate the man, with each attempt being unsuccessful. The man has then walked off towards Tenai Road in the direction of the shopping centre, still armed with the slasher. Following further warnings by police, an armed officer has then shot the man. He shot him twice.
Andy McGregor says methamphetamine can make people immune to the effects of pepper spray and tasers. Today's shooting by police is the second in less than 48 hours. On Tuesday evening in Hamilton, 36-year-old Nicholas Marshall was fatally shot during what police say was a drugs and weapons raid. The police say Mr Marshall refused to drop his weapon, leaving them no choice but to shoot. However, his father and girlfriend dispute this and say he was unarmed. This kind of discrepancy is prompting what we were talking about before, calls for police to start wearing body-mounted cameras, as they do, for example, in some Australian states. The Chief Executive of the Australian Police Federation, Mark Burgess, told our reporter Alex Ashton the cameras serve a worthwhile purpose.
Quite often what would happen is the only vision you would see of that is that very small portion of the incident that potentially showed the close interaction with a police officer and a member of the public. And that would be oftentimes blown out of all proportion. So a lot of people were of the view, well, if we had body-worn video, you would see the full incident. And in fact, we've had many instances where when the full incident is replayed to a court or to the general public, they realise that the actions of the police officer were quite warranted.
How often are they used? Are they on all the time? Or
again, this is an issue that might vary from place to place around the world. I mean, people would say they should be turned on at the start of the shift and just run all shift. There is a school of thought that says perhaps the police officer should be given the appropriate discretion to know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. Because obviously police will be in situations where, you know, quite evidently the privacy of some individuals might be compromised. And therefore we would say the police officer should have the discretion to be able to say in those situations, particularly say in someone's residence, etc., that it might be appropriate just at the moment to turn this device off.
I guess the issue with if it was to be able to be turned off and on is that in cases like, for example, in New Zealand, where we had somebody shot and there's a dispute over whether or not he was armed and how things played out.
Yep.
If that was in a residence and if that was turned off at the time, it would have missed it. And
no, look, and that's absolutely right. And they're the sort of things that people have got to talk through. We're not saying that should be a blanket decision, but there's quite evidently probably many more instances than the one yesterday, where police officers would be in a situation where they say to themselves, it's probably not appropriate that this camera's on at the moment, but if they're forced to have it on all the time, then of course that's the policy. I mean, you've got the other instance where sometimes people might not want to talk to you if they know that they're actually being recorded. Every word they say, every move they make is being recorded. In fact, in Victoria, in the recent Royal Commission into Family Violence, whilst they found that the body-worn videos were a really good outcome, they also said there are potential pitfalls associated with its use. And one of those related to the issue around people feeling compelled to give a statement on the camera at the time, etc. So, you've got to balance those sort of things to get the right outcome.
So how do officers over there feel about using cameras?
By and large, officers believe that it protects them. Whilst I'm sure that there's many out there, many defence lawyers and others in the wider community think this is all about trying to catch out the police. Quite clearly, evidence has shown, not only in Australia but around the world, is quite often the behaviour of people that you can see it from start to finish, not just that 5 or 10 or 15 second grab that someone might get on an iPhone. And therefore what you've got is people, they either change their behaviour, or when you put them before the court, they see what they've done, they plead guilty, and the matter moves on.
So there you are, Richard, who emailed in before. Full support for your idea from the Australian Police Federation's Mark Burgess, who was talking to our reporter Alex Ashton. In New Zealand, the police say there are no plans to bring in body-worn cameras, but they're keeping a watch on other agencies that do use them. A spokesperson says the technology is there, but there are issues around how to store the footage and also privacy issues to work through. It's 14 minutes past 6. A new report has heavily criticised how the Ministry of Education handled the post-earthquake Christchurch school reshuffle. Nearly 4 years ago, the Canterbury Primary Principals Association researchers found the processes were rushed and created long-lasting trauma and anxiety for schools and the children who attend them. Michael Kropp reports.
The announcement that 13 schools would be closed and 18 merged was met with widespread shock and confusion in September 2012. Research by the Canterbury Primary Principals Association found the decision caused long-lasting emotional harm. The association's president, Jeanette Shearer, says there was also confusion about how choices had been made and a lack of consultation.
The inquiry actually found that it could have been handled better, and that it had created trauma for people, yes.
She says the effects are ongoing today.
I think the people who were directly affected, whose schools were closed, who may have lost jobs, definitely it would still rankle with them the way it was done and the devastation that it caused for them.
The report says the process was poorly communicated, which added to the anxiety, trauma, cynicism and anger already visible in some communities. At the meeting announcing the closures and mergers, principals were given colour-coded name tags which ultimately revealed their school's fate. Tony Burnside, who was the principal of the now closed Central New Brighton School, says it felt like the rug was being pulled out from underneath.
It was only just a year after the earthquakes, and we could see in our families and our children that we were the stability. There was so much going on in lives for them, and school was the place where they could come to. The people were the same, the routines were the same, we were the safe haven. When it was proposed that we merge, to shake that up at that moment in time was absolutely the wrong thing to do.
The Ministry of Education concedes it mismanaged the start of the reshuffle, but says it has done a much better job since. The Acting Secretary for Education, Katrina Casey, acknowledges the process was unsettling.
So we accept that the beginning of the process wasn't as good as it should have been and that had an impact. But what we also know is that the decisions that were made several years later, when we see the kids in their new environments, were the right thing to do.
Katrina Casey says the changes, some of which are still ongoing, cover 85,000 students in more than 300 early childhood centres and 200 schools. The Labour Party's education spokesperson Chris Hipkins says it's now up to the Minister, Hekia Parata, to apologise to the Christchurch community for the hurt.
The apology is long overdue. It was a really horrific process from start to finish. There was enormous goodwill in Christchurch towards the government around making changes as a result of the earthquake. Hiki Parata managed to burn off all of that goodwill by handling the process so badly.
The Minister's office declined an interview, saying Ms Parata has previously acknowledged it was a really bad process and all school engagement since then has been much better. For Checkpoint, Ko Michael Crop there.
Coming up, we're going to Christchurch. We've got Billy Apple, John Britton, motorcycles, doing patches out the front, I think, of the gallery. But first, the AA is calling for a ban on wheel clamping amidst growing complaints against the practice. Last year, a voluntary code of practice was introduced to regulate clamping, but only some parking enforcement companies signed up. The AA says wheel clamping should be stopped because it's severe and ineffective. Our reporter Eva Collette spoke to drivers about their experiences of being clamped.
It can cost hundreds of dollars to have a car released from a clamp, but for one Monaco driver, dealing with the fallout cost her a day's worth of shopping.
So while I was doing that, making calls here and there, someone took my belongings. I went over to the ATM machine to get the money, and I've totally got distracted that I forgot that I had shopping with me.
The same driver says she was reluctant to return to the store.
I went straight in the shop. I said, look, you guys know I spend that much money, buying stuff and all. And they said, okay, we can look in the camera, but unfortunately there was no camera there.
Another woman says she stopped visiting her favourite store in Henderson when her car was clamped outside it 3 years ago. She says she had no option but to get her husband to drive from Helensville to pay the fine.
You need your car. There's no way they will help you. No way. They're very demanding, and then they want you to pay. If not, they'll take it.
Another Henderson driver says she had heard of people removing their wheels because they couldn't afford the fine. The AA's principal advisor, Mark Stockdale, says clamping is out of proportion to the offence and it's bad for the businesses who contract clampers.
It doesn't actually do what the shop owners and landlords want, and that is that they want to free up the car park space so that it can be used by a legitimate customer who might spend money in that shop. Clamping simply does not achieve that, so it's the wrong solution to that problem. There's no place for it in New Zealand.
Mr Stockdale says clamping and towing should be used as a last resort and breach notices be given first because they are fairer.
We'd still like to see clamping banned outright, and the only way that's going to happen is if motorists complain when they've received a wheel clamp and they think it's unjust, and they need to complain to their MP, they need to go public, go to the media, and if enough people complain and, create enough angst out there, then that might force the government to react.
For some parking enforcement companies like Wilson Parking and Secure Parking New Zealand, clamping is now out of the question. Wilson Parking says it stopped clamping and towing in 2010 because it was too punitive. The General Manager of Secure Parking, Rob Harmon, says they have never used clamping.
By clamping, you don't actually remove that problem because the car remains where it is. So by issuing breach notices, the enforcement is that they're issued with the notice and are able to drive away rather than having to pay anything on the spot to get access to their vehicle again.
RNZ tried to contact several companies that do still clamp, but they didn't respond to our calls. More Checkpoint, ko Eva Collette tēnei.
Kia ora, Eva. 6:20. John Britton's record-setting motorbike was unveiled at the Christchurch Art Gallery today at the launch of a new exhibition by acclaimed artist Billy Apple, which officially opens this weekend. Worth attending if you're anywhere near Christchurch. The launch began this morning with champion superbike racer Andrew Stroud riding the famous bike around the block before finishing with a celebratory burnout on the Art Gallery forecourt. Our reporter Conan Young, who's a very hard-working fellow, was there. He spoke to Andrew Stroud and Billy Apple, but began by asking Mr Apple why people should come and see his Great Britain exhibition.
They'll have to come and see, won't they? But they'll see the bike to start with, and it's on a big runway, and it sits in the middle of the gallery on this runway, and behind it is a bright green wall, full like a big billboard. The whole end wall is green, but a black and white checker base like the flag, endless flag. and then 5 to scale to each other of the race circuits at Andrew Road, and the title of the race circuits underneath that, and all facing true north. And some circuits are large, like Daytona and Brands Hatches. You think, my God, it's just like a backyard small walk, but no, I think, and there's trophies there. They thought the trophy was had gone in the earthquake, and it wasn't. Then we have the trophy that Andrew received.
Tell us about this trophy.
It's made of crystal, so that's why they didn't think it would survive.
And this was for
winning the World Championship in '95. Bears World Championship, British, European, American Racing Series.
And so there's obviously some great stories attached to these bikes and to the whole the legacy, I guess, that John Britton left behind. Is that what you're trying to get across with this?
Well, I mean, I don't know enough about John personally to be able to discuss that, and I've read the books and things. But he's a Renaissance person. I mean, with his concepts for his building and convincing the city to run a tram line through the middle of a building, and I mean, I know what that's like. I have a lot to do with the council in Auckland about projects, and it's not easy, but once you start it, they'll let you do anything almost. And John was like that, I'm sure.
Have you ever been involved in an exhibition quite like this?
Oh, I've done, like Andrew done, loads of exhibitions, like he's done races. I mean, they're all different. They're all different.
And Andrew, so I guess your own history has been sort of commemorated here as well with all of these races you've been part of. For people who aren't familiar with John Britton and your history with racing these bikes, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I first met John Britton. I did a World Superbike race at Manfield, and back in about '91 or maybe, and he came and talked to me at the afternoon and told me about this motorbike he was building and how he wanted to win at Daytona. And I didn't really follow him up on it. He asked me if I wanted to ride it, but I wanted to do 500 GPs and World Superbikes at the time, and I didn't really see how a homemade bike in New Zealand was going to really fit into that. But so a friend of mine rode it, and I was with him at Ruapuna when it first came out of the van, this creation that John Britton and all his people who had gathered around to help build it. And Chris did a wheelie down the straight and put the front wheel down, and the whole front end snapped off it, and so he went over the handlebars and broke his collarbone, and he didn't want to ride it, so John asked me to ride it again. That's after, probably the next day after John, he decided to can the whole project after. They didn't really want to see anyone get hurt on what he had built, so he asked me to, and so I agreed to ride it at Daytona. I'd done the same kind of mechanical engineering qualification that John had done, and I'd really looked over the bike quite well to see if I thought it was structurally sound enough to do 300 kilometres an hour around the banking at Daytona, which is about 33 degrees, and it really puts a lot of load on the suspension and the chassis and everything. But so we went to Daytona, and the bike, we were going to win it too and beat the factory Ducati, I'm sure of it, but the battery went flat with about 2 laps to go and it stopped. We went back 2 years later and set the fastest top speed of any motorbike that had ever been to Daytona, 189 miles an hour, and won both the races. We won again in '95, and that was the first round of the World Bear Series. So, and that was the year that John found out that he had cancer, and I just wanted to go out and win every race I could for him, really.
Which you did.
Yeah, which we did, yeah. So we won every round that I entered. There's one I didn't do because I was doing a 500 GP that weekend, and I had to leave doing 500 GPs actually to do all the races on the Britain, but I think I'm pleased I did.
And so how does it make you feel to sort of see this exhibition happening here, this really paying tribute to John Britton?
I haven't seen it yet, but that's a great thing so far, especially in Christchurch. John's heart was in Christchurch, I think, and it's something that Christchurch people can be proud of and inspired by, to just have a go at their own aspirations and dreams that they've got going on. John wasn't super confident or anything. He was dyslexic. He could hardly read, and he wasn't that confident around people, but he had a bit of charisma about him, and people just loved to help him and get behind him, and it just goes to show that when you just do it anyway and overcome all those fears and inhibitions and things, great things can come out of us, and Billy's the same with his art. So yeah, just I suppose in the hope that people will be better off for seeing it.
And so we got things off to a bit of a flying start here this morning with the burnout in front of the gallery. So how did that all go?
It was a bit of a puzzle, really, to do a Britain B burnout smoking up the back tyre. I should have really had it all mapped out to about a 6-point operation, but however, I had to work it out along the way. It's not so bad, but I managed to do a pretty decent wheelie along Worcester Street there. At first we were going to have a police escort, so I was hoping the police car with the flashing lights could have been behind me, just for the cameras, but no.
And how did the bike handle the burnout?
It handled it all right for a while until it overheated, because it needs air circulation. So I went back down the street to try and get some more air through it to cool it down, but it didn't really work, so it ended up boiling, so we had to shut it off.
So it's more of a racing machine than a stunt machine?
It is, yeah. It's a total thoroughbred racing machine.
That's Conan Young, our reporter, talking to Billy Apple, who looks younger than when I last saw him, which was 2 or 3 years ago. That's quite remarkable, Billy. And Andrew Stroud, who's competed in 41 World Superbike races, including, of course, the famous Isle of Man. We're going to end tonight with the funeral for 3 of the 5 Dallas police officers killed by a sniper in the city last week. This report in from Gavino Garay of Reuters.
The first funerals for Dallas officers killed in what authorities have described as a racially motivated ambush shooting. 3 of 5 police officers who were shot dead by a sniper towards the end of a Black Lives Matter protest last Thursday in Dallas have been laid to rest.
Dude, that's a cop down!
U.S. veteran Micah Johnson opened fire, killing the 5 officers during a demonstration against the killings of 2 black men by police earlier that week.
I'm up here somewhere. It's a sniper? You hear the shot? Get down. Get down. Get down.
Among those killed was Dallas area rapid transit officer Brent Thompson, who had married just 2 weeks before he was shot dead. Funerals were also held for 55-year-old Sergeant Michael Smith and 48-year-old Officer Lorne Aarons of the Dallas Police Department. Services for the other 2 slain officers, Michael Kroll and Patrick Zamaripa, are expected later in the week.
Gavino Garay from Reuters with that report. Lots of feedback still on affordable housing in Auckland and how you get it. Hi, can John Campbell ask when was the last ballot for affordable housing at Hobsonville? My daughter has been trying to find out about them for a year and there were none available at the time when she asked, why are they not advertised on Trade Me, says Angela Taylor. Angela, my understanding is the list is so long they simply don't have to advertise, but we'll look at that. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Thank you for being with us. Good evening, everyone.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police tasered and pepper sprayed a man wielding a slasher in Rotorua before they shot and critically injured him this afternoon. He's been operated on in the city's hospital. Most buyers have told RNZ they're struggling to contact developers about promised affordable housing in Auckland's special housing areas. A family of 10 has been left devastated after fire destroyed their Mangere home. And a multi-storey derelict building is on fire in Seoul Square in central Christchurch. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Every weekday lunchtime, RNZ National presents in-depth coverage of international news and issues.
I will always do what is correct, whether the individual concerned is an ordinary citizen or a sitting president.
Not just the headlines, but full reporting of the most important overseas stories of the day from correspondents on the ground as world news breaks.
Prime Minister